Chinese architecture has experienced change over time as new rulers reigned over the land and foreign investment created influences on Chinese provinces. As the culture evolved and grew, so did the architecture. Changes occurred regarding both spiritual and material factors, but throughout time, the Chinese architectural style has been regarded as a reflection of the life, wisdom, and culture of the Chinese people. In ancient China, architecture prominently featured wooden structures. With the evolution of machinery and construction techniques, the Chinese people saw a shift to cement and steel. These techniques and adaptations were not all developed internally. Many were brought in from Western powers. For example, Yang Fang, or foreign-style houses, first appeared in the foreign concessions of various big cities. Since art is sentimentally symbolic in Asian countries, there was much resistance, and several attempts were made to create a national style by contemporary Chinese architectural circles. As opposed to the over-dimensioned architecture of Western cathedrals, Chinese people designed housings fit for human dimensions so that they may feel intimate and safe. Chinese people practice moderation in all things and don't lay emphasis on strong self-expression, but seek modesty and gentleness. Typically, Chinese dwellings appear rather plain and ordinary from the front, with the best features being confined to the interior. As China exists today, you will notice a number of points of emphasis regarding construction. In many structures, there is a central axis with a symmetric composition. This represents the balance that the Chinese stress within their culture. Secondary elements are positioned on either side of main structures as two wings to maintain overall bilateral symmetry. Bilateral symmetry is found everywhere in Chinese architecture, from palace complexes to humble farmhouses to factories. In contrast to the buildings, Chinese gardens tend to be asymmetrical. The principle underlying the garden's composition is to create enduring flow. Often, buildings that were positioned near each other utilized a common roof to block the rain as well as provide shade to keep residents cool in the hot climate. Also, buildings were constructed and arranged in accordance with their importance. In this case, buildings with doors facing the front of the property were deemed more important than buildings with doors on the sides. Buildings with doors facing the rear signified the least important. Certain mountain, forest, Taoist temples and residences adopt the method of free combination. No matter which method is used, great attention is paid to the pursuit of neutral, easy, reserved, and deep aesthetic characters, giving expressions to the aesthetic habits of the Chinese nation. Recently, China is experiencing another architectural transformation. The Chinese government has been using American firms to construct new buildings, and these firms are designing modern structures to be erected in China rather quickly. Chinese officials are giving these American firms the ability to meet certain specifications, such as square feet and number of bed and bathrooms, with their own Western style. This will lead to a great shift, as the Chinese architects may soon utilize best of the American efficiencies along with a Western flair. Prior to 1841, Hong Kong mainly consisted of Chinese temples and fortified villages, but this all changed when the British settled in Hong Kong. Only a few of the original structures have survived. Architecture in mid and late 1800s mainly consisted of 3- and 4-story buildings tightly packed in city blocks and combined both Chinese and European architectural elements. Ground floor was typically retail with apartments on top floors. The first high-rise was built in 1905, and it was a complex of 5 buildings, all of which were 5 to 6 stories high. In 1935, the first true skyscraper was built. It was also the first building to have air conditioning. This building has since been replaced with the HSBC building. The Building Ordinance of 1955 lifted the height limit of residential buildings, which is when multi-story residential buildings started appearing. This change was necessary due to the influx of refugees into Hong Kong after the communist takeover of China in 1949 and the subsequent slum fire of 1953, which left 53,000 people homeless. During the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the demand for skyscrapers existed only in central Hong Kong due to height restrictions outside of this area. These restrictions were lifted in the late 1990s, resulting in a skyscraper boom. Currently, Hong Kong has the world's biggest skyline with a total of 7,681 skyscrapers, a majority of which have been built in the last 2 decades. There are few historical buildings remaining due to Hong Kong's creative destruction, making it a center for modern architecture. 4 of the 15 tallest skyscrapers in the world are in Hong Kong. Among the most important structures in Hong Kong are 2 International Finance Center, Hong Kong's tallest building, which was completed in 2003. Exchange Square was recognized as an important architectural achievement by Time magazine at the time of its construction. The HSBC main building was the first building of its size in Hong Kong to be constructed entirely of structural steel without any reinforced concrete in the inner core. The building is also one of the few to not have elevators as the primary carrier of building traffic. Instead, elevators only stop every few floors, and the floors are interconnected by escalators. The Center is the 5th tallest skyscraper in Hong Kong. It is notable for its vivid, low-voltage neon light system that creates a slowly changing light show during the night, providing a spectacle that has become a central landmark in its own right. The asymmetrical form of the Bank of China Tower is pure geometry and has been compared to a bamboo plant, which extends its trunk successfully higher with each new burst of growth, symbolizing livelihood and prosperity. It is designed to withstand the force of typhoon-strength winds and also appears in the top 10 office buildings in the world list. The Lippo Center building was dubbed as the koala tree because it resembles koalas clutching a tree. This building was designed by an American architect who strove to relieve the traditional severity of skyscraper walls by designing clusters of obtruding windows. The Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center is one of Hong Kong's most impressive and stunning pieces of architecture with its sweeping sills, roof, and vast glass windows. It is a striking visual testament to Hong Kong's ongoing development. Hong Kong International Airport was one of the largest construction projects in Hong Kong and a huge land reclamation project linked to the center of Hong Kong by the Lantau Link, which features 3 new major bridges, including the world's 6th largest suspension bridge, the world's longest cable-stayed bridge carrying both road and railway traffic, and the world's first major 4-span cable-stayed bridge. The practice of feng shui began in the West Han Dynasty around the 3rd century BC. Feng shui believes that the earth is a living thing and has life and energy. The energy, or qi, of a site depends on its topography and its physical surroundings. A site with revitalizing energy is healthy, and a site with bad energy was damaging to those who lived on it. Ever since then, it has been incorporated into traditional Chinese architecture and has been followed by the rich and poor alike. This practice can be observed in many of the buildings throughout the Pearl River South in China. Some of the most obvious structures were those that face the various bodies of water. Facing Repulse Bay is this large turquoise building with a huge square hole in the middle. It is said that this hole is because the building was built close to the mountain, where dragons reside, and the hole is intended to allow the dragons to pass through to the ocean on the other side for a drink of water. This hole in the building theme can be seen in several other buildings facing the various harbors in Hong Kong. Water is strongly associated with wealth in feng shui, so the Chinese and even the British believe that those who have a direct view of a body of water are more likely to prosper than those who do not. The HSBC building has a wide open area in front of it, with no other buildings blocking its view of Victoria Harbor. Thus, it is considered to have good feng shui. Even though the Hong Kong government is proposing extending the existing coastline further out into the harbor in its latest land reclamation project, it will still set aside space so that no new developments will block the HSBC building's view of the harbor. Since 1935, the 2 bronze lion sculptures have been sitting outside the HSBC building guarding the entrance of the bank. The Hong Kong lions are objects of veneration and foci of the bank's perceived excellent feng shui. Young couples bring their toddlers to stroke the paws and noses of the statues, hoping for luck and prosperity. Conversely, only a few buildings over, the Bank of China Tower has what is considered some of the worst feng shui in Hong Kong. The bank is the only major building in Hong Kong to have bypassed the convention of consulting with feng shui masters on matters of design prior to construction. The landscaping you see here was a designer's attempt to counter the bad feng shui of the rest of the building. Circles, which look like coins, bring prosperity. The opposite effect is supposedly caused by the building's triangular angles and sharp edges. Indeed, many believe that it has had a negative effect on nearby structures. The Lippo Center, which faces one of the triangles, was formerly the Bond Center, owned by disgraced Australian businessman Alan Bond, who was forced to sell the building because of financial troubles. The Government House, seen here with the tower behind it, was still the residence of colonial governors when the bank was built. According to an urban legend, the nearby Bank of China Tower was deliberately designed to be shaped like a blade so as to reflect the bad feng shui to the Government House and its British administration. It is believed that willow trees were planted in the Government House garden to block the ensuing bad luck. Another example of correcting bad feng shui is the Hopewell Center, seen in the center back of this photo. When this building was originally built, the Chinese were alarmed because the tall, white office building resembles a white candle, which represents death. The geomancer was consulted, and he recommended building a pool on the roof since water snuffs out fire. This pool counteracted the building's bad qi. It is easy to see that the Chinese take the feng shui concept very seriously. So serious, in fact, that in May of 1998, a bridge near the village of Qingshan in Guangdong was actually blown up because it so seriously violated feng shui principles.